Ricky, thank you so much for joining today. And it is a wonderful coincidence that you are quite literally down the road.
Literally
People
the corner.
literally around the corner. People will use that term quite flippantly, but
Yeah.
you are literally down the road.
Yeah. You drive past my house on the way back to the studio.
Yeah, probably did. Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
So, Ricky, I would love to kind of just start by asking you a bit about your background. Like, where have you come from? Where does Ricky originate from?
I have to thank my mother for that. Unfortunately, without her, yeah, I wouldn't be around. But yeah, a little bit of the backstory. Happy to share. Grew up in South Africa. My grandparents and mother actually immigrated from the UK, so they were from Bury, just outside of Manchester. Went to South Africa, yeah, to the Commonwealth to see if things were slightly better in South Africa than they were in Manchester. Certainly, the weather was. Whether everything else was, I'm not sure. Hence, coming back here. Did my schooling there. Came back to the UK in 1991. I wasn't a great student, so when I arrived here, I had the equivalent of would have been GCSEs, maybe even then O levels, but
O-level,
English and maths, that was it, and barely English and maths, and certainly the any jobs I thought to apply for, no one understood the qualification and let alone the accents. I came over in the era of Spitting Image, if I'm not mistaken, and everyone used to say to me, there was a song on Spitting Image which used to be, I've never met a nice South African. And that was replayed to me on many, many occasions. Got my first job on a golf course near in the village we lived in, Hertfordshire. Spent the next 10 years, I guess, as like a blue-collar worker. Greenkeeper, mechanic, bartender, waiter, all those types of things, and enjoyed it. Had a great time. Traveled, backpacking in different parts of the world, and then I guess at the end of the 2000s, had to consider getting a serious job. And my now wife, then girlfriend, was a chef, and she said, "I'm getting into IT." Because the pay is amazing, and I hate working in the kitchen because the hours are terrible. And I thought to myself, you know what? I think I could do this in inverted commas, a computer course, and it ended up being a Microsoft certification. We actually, we went back to South Africa for this because it was much cheaper to do there than over here. The first college I went to had to do an aptitude test, and it was one of these psychometric tests around cognitive ability, so circle, circle, square, triangle, what's next? My brain just doesn't compute those things. Like, I don't know. I don't know what's next. Just give me what's next and I'll deal with it. And funny enough, they said to me after they saw the results of the test, they said, Ricky, we don't think you should get into IT. You're not a logical thinker at all. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've always been a hands-on type of guy, so let me just go back to the golf course. In fact, I actually was offered a job on a golf course in between these the psychometric test and the second college. Went to the second college, and the criteria was, can you afford the fees?
simple.
Very simple. No, I can't, but let me see if I can do something on that front. And fortunately, someone loaned me the money. And anyway, do this course and did 1 year there. And at the end of that course, fortunately, someone called the college and said, look, have you got this junior engineer? Bearing in mind, I'm mid-20s. So I'm not like, in the traditional sense, a junior engineer, but in terms of career, very much early careers. And the lady in the college, who wasn't like a social connection or a friend, I think may have seen something in me I hadn't seen in myself, because for all intents and purposes, I was going back to the golf course. I'd just done this computer course, as I called it, with the mindset of everyone's going to need to know a little bit more about computers. Remember, this is back in 1999. And anyway, she called me to the office and she says, look, I've got this opportunity for you. It's not a job. but it's an interview. They've asked me for one person, and I think you might be the right fit. Wow, amazing. And it happened to be a bank, and I went to the bank, fortunately got the job, and my whole professional career opened up in front of me. So I went from there. We actually then got married, moved back to the UK. And a lot of, the story with life, it's about sliding door moments and timing and luck. I arrived in the UK. The bank I worked for in South Africa had an office over here, or at least an affiliate over here. And when I arrived, someone was just leaving, and they thought, well, give you a chance. And it happened to be an investment bank in the city, where I swore probably 10 years earlier I would never work in the city and never wear a suit when I was a greenkeeper. And then I was working in the city and wearing a suit. So never challenge the universe, because it has a way of coming back to
Yeah.
you. And then fast forward, I was there for a little while, came up with an idea for a business in about 2006. So it was very much a technical role that I was involved in, like a Microsoft technician, engineer. And what I noticed was, and literally the story was, a young engineer came to me and he says, hey, Ricky, how do I do this particular thing? And his name was Winston. I said to Winston, I told you, that, at least in this last week, how to solve this problem. But I don't know, you're not retaining the information. I said, the best way you're going to be able to retain the information is actually to do the task I've told you. So his response was, great, give me access to the production environment and I'll go and do what you tell me. I'm like, it doesn't work that way. You have to build this, like your own practice environments. And Winston came up with all these challenges. Don't have the hardware, software. And like 5 minutes later, literally like in the comic book, I have this light bulb moment go off in my head going, actually, I wonder if we built this environment for young engineers to go and develop their practical skills on real life working equipment, aids in kind of developing their skills development and de-risks the corporate infrastructure. Anyway, so I built that. I come up with this idea, approach a friend of mine. We start this business, and we're working full time. So if you had to actually ask me what we did between 2006 and at least 2011, I can't remember a single day. I just know it was a full-time job, and we worked and we tried to get a customer somehow, and we hustled and we hustled, and we eventually got a break in 2011. And that's where I think the business really starts. My wife would say, well, I don't know what you're doing for the first 5 years then.
And out of interest, how did you get that first client?
Yeah. It helps. And for us, we went from that starting point being myself, my business partner, 2 apprentices. And then we were fortunate enough to grow that business up until 2020, we exited. And fortunately, it was a very clean deal. I managed to kind of come out of it. I had the full intentions of staying, but I think I'm one of these people that's driven a lot by my guts, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. And I woke up. Well, actually, when I asked myself, the question was more, have you got another 5 years for being part of this new venture with the acquirers? And it wasn't a no, but it wasn't a hard yes. And my problem is, I woke up the next day and went, well, if it's not a hard yes, then it has to be a no. So I left that business, started being involved in a couple of other startups since then, and then went on to start Day One about 18 months ago. And we're on the journey again, the hustle again.
So that's a really interesting. Thank you for all that. That's a really interesting kind of backstory. So when you were in 2011, when you were kind of hustling to try and get your first client, how did you manage it? How did you get your first?
The first one was some guys up in Luton. I remember them very clearly. And fortunately enough, 2011 was a breaking point. We actually got our first client in 2008, and I remember sitting with my business partner at his house. I go and sit with him. I'm like, this business is finished. We can't sell anything. We don't know what we're doing. We didn't know things. We were too techies. We didn't understand product market fit, marketing, sales. Our philosophy in sales was build it and they will come. And we built it. and no one came.
I know, okay.
In true techie fashion, and I see this often with the subsequent technical founders, is you don't think there's a problem with sales and marketing. You think there's a problem with the platform. So you put more tech into it. So you build an even better platform, and you go, only a fool couldn't see how good this is because we built it and no one's come. So if I go back to that, I remember sitting with him. I was like, you know what, we're going to have to go back to our day jobs because this just isn't working. I said, let's have one more roll of the dice. Okay, if I really think about where's the problem, and maybe for the first time after 3 years, you kind of identify, solve a problem, and you might find a customer. I mean, okay, online training was starting to get some momentum, certainly in that technical space, and I think everywhere, like e-learning was gaining some traction. And in our world, that technical world, there were a lot of providers providing the content, and what there seems to be a gap between the learning was there, forums were there to kind of facilitate the in-class collaboration, if you like, but the hands-on piece was missing. So, I thought, okay, well, if we're going to have to go trying to find our first client, and I remember doing this, Google, show me all UK-based Microsoft training companies, and I guess this was before GDPR, and we had to worry about just spamming people's email addresses. And I literally went to the website info@, and I just sent emails. Hey, I see you got courses. Do you want a hands-on component with that? And just, I guess, like anything in sales, it's timing. Just on that day, someone read that email and went, "Yeah, it would be interesting to have a discussion." And really excited and got our pitch together, and we drove up to Luton, and look, we managed to secure that first deal. But there was no, I can tell you, if the first one, in my opinion, is never much about skill in selling. It's just about the luck of the draw. At that point in time, we were lucky to get that. The beauty is we had a really good product that we had spent years developing. So actually, when we got to the sales process, the time we had invested early on became a much easier sell for us because the platform was actually really good, because we built it and no one came, but we had a really good thing that no one saw. So when we showed it to the first person, they said, yes, we'll take it.
I love that. I think it's a perfect representation of such a common issue, which is being really enthusiastic about a business, whatever that business is. I think lots of people will go through that, whether you're a life coach or whether you're starting a new restaurant. You still need to learn sales and marketing. You Absolutely. Have to learn it, and interestingly, the model you went down was cold email marketing, and that got you your first appointment, and then you had to create a presentation. You had to follow, even probably without knowing it, a sales methodology. You were following a sales methodology and a marketing methodology. I'm going to research my ICP, my ideal customer profile, so even without any training or understanding behind it, you kind of figured it out. And I love that story, because I think that will be really, really classic. But also, you were in a really prime position, because I know of customers I've had in the past who have started to sell a product that isn't quite ready, and you can sell it. Absolutely. But it's a hard sell, and that's where having lots of sales acumen works really to your advantage, because you have the skill set to then go ahead and sell an unfinished product.
And I've seen that many of the really good salespeople can sell bad products, but when it really comes together, I think like good salespeople and good products, then you kind of really get that traction moving forward. But I think one of the challenges, if I look back on just that sales perspective, I think certainly owner founders always would say we're the worst. We don't know how to sell. And actually, I think the opposite is true. They're the best salespeople because they believe in it. They've created it. They are the best person to position it. What we are terrible at is prospecting. Owner founders just do not know how to prospect to find the next customer. So it's fine. I'd sent these 10 emails. Back in the beginning, I got one response, and all I did was latch onto the one. And great, we only need 5 of these, but you forget about actually you need 500, because this is just a numbers game, and because you're only going to convert so many of them. And that prospecting piece is probably the hardest skill actually in the sales process from an owner founder perspective. To build the sales engine, it's a hard thing to get right, and probably the most undervalued element of sales is kind of getting to speak to that first person.
I love that you've said all that. When I talk to customers, this is my pitch. Like that. Because that is absolutely the case, you know. And until you've done it, you don't realize how difficult it is, or until you try it, you don't realize how difficult that is without knowing what you're doing or the right skill set and all the rest of them. There's lots of ways of failing about it, and that's why most businesses will end up relying solely on referrals. You know, if I were to ask 100 business owners today, where'd you get your business? 90 of them will go referrals only.
Yeah.
All right. And the referrals work really well. They work to your advantage. They're free. They're quick. But from a scalability perspective, obviously there's limitations to it. So you need to be able to go outside of that. And if you haven't got your first referral, how'd you get your next? Right?
And it's not just, it's that momentum, because you can still use your network. It's like when you run out of those connections, and how are you building the sales engine that, the stuff in the top translates to something at the bottom where you can try and make deals. So it's the hardest part of any business, I think, is, for me personally, having been through that journey, like the hardest part to get right is that sales engine process. It's really tough. Like product easy, people not easy, but relatively easy in comparison to selling. Well, they're not selling, finding customers, too, because there's a very clear distinction between the two. I think, selling, once we're sitting here together, anyone if you're really passionate about your product, you tell the story, people buy into it or they don't. That's the easy part. But getting to that meeting, tough.
It's tough. It's tough when you don't know how. That's the thing, isn't it? Like anything, like if once you figure out how to do it, it's so easy. It's genuinely, it's just like anything. Like for you, developing a product for you was probably not necessarily easy, but because you know what you're doing, there was an ease to it. Whereas me developing product, I'd be like, well, no chance. I have absolutely no idea. But it's really, really interesting. And so I'll be fascinated to learn. So that was your first client. And then, so what happened thereafter? Was it then based on referrals, or did you find yourself going through the same process of prospecting and following that same methodology?
You know what? We probably, in all honesty, I should say yes. And we became real experts at this, and we just built pipeline and business, but we didn't. What actually happened, I think we pivoted, rightly so in hindsight, but I think at the time probably just through to a lack of prospecting. So the first client, and we found off the back of it, because you've got one, if you were speaking to a couple of others, hey, we've already got a customer, so there's a little of the FOMO piece. So we managed to close, I think, I'm just trying to think back to it. I remember the second guy's Retendo training, and then we went to probably a third one. And what we had found with this very small group is, as a reseller in our particular business, we had a challenge with this. Like the reseller model of our product was very variable. Like the first month, I remember, like, because everyone's excited about it, the sales team who were working on our behalf went and told all of their customers about it. So you had this first wave of purchase. Month 2 was like, what happened here? Like last month was, let's just keep the numbers simple. Last month was 1,000. This month's only 250. What happened? No, well, all the first round clients bought, and now we're going to have to market and do anything. Then it went up to 350. Then it went back to 1,000, and then it went back to 150. So it was very variable. And I didn't like that model. I wanted something a little bit more sustainable. So for us, what I learned about our business was the people we were working with were reselling content that was actually created in the US. So I thought, okay, well, doesn't it make sense for us to move up the food chain a little bit? Why don't I speak to the guys in the US who are creating the content, and actually they become almost more of a distributor? And we got one introduction, and fortunately the introduction via the reseller, they could see some of the activity from the reseller. So they were quite interested to go, well, actually, could we bring this? And we were very early to market with our technology. Again, going back to the downside of our business, although we couldn't sell it, we had this great product that very few had. So it made it easier to sell as we got more exposure in the market. So our journey actually led us to North America, which I guess if I look back at it, every company that I've spoken to since, certainly from UK based, once you break into North America, we couldn't break into the UK, but so we went to North America first. And one of these distributors got it to their channel in North America, and you know what? Then again, there was no strategy behind the sales piece. It just became for me. I was there quite a lot, so there's a sacrifice to be made from a family and time commitment to be there. And actually, then I guess I know you see it through a different lens. I talk about I just made more friends, and maybe being at a conference. Some may call it networking. So it was a real networking type thing. Um, but I think we benefited from being early to market with a good product. Now people were looking for us. I think we won their first distributor. It became much easier. I just had to be around. Well, not as simple as that, but I made myself available to people. And then my strategy kind of evolved to this. I would, if we were looking to get into a partner, instead of trying to, like our meeting today, I think we probably arranged it a month ago and we booked it in, and I've committed to doing it. I think what you find with a lot of sales calls or meetings in that vein, especially if you're based in the UK, like what you might book it a month in advance. What happens normally, like the week before, 3 days before, the customer's potential customer, could we reschedule? And now you're kind of chasing, struggling their meeting. I found the strategy to work in the US. I'd go literally, I'd say, okay, I'm going to the US next week. And I'd email a customer or prospects that we would go, potentially working on, look, I'm going to be in Phoenix. I mean, I wasn't just going to be in Phoenix, but I made myself available. I happen to be in Phoenix on Monday morning. Would you mind meeting for a coffee? And because of that really short window, actually someone could go, well, you're coming all this way, for one. Okay, so I should probably give you a time for a coffee. And by the way, actually, I could probably move a couple of things because it's only 3 days away. You haven't got this big air gap in the middle where you commit and then have to move. And that's how it became. So that was my prospecting piece. I just go on the road, email people, I'm in town, do you want to meet for a coffee? And so we managed to make a few more friends.
What's absolutely fascinating, listening to you describe that, is the last podcast I just recorded was all about networking and how to utilize networking to generate business for yourself. And interestingly, so this guy runs a network and has been trained in it and is a specialist. Says the biggest mistake people make when they go networking is they try and just pitch. And he said, actually, what you need to do is go and make friends. So it's fascinating that was something that naturally came to you, because actually the majority of people will fail at that. They'll make the big mistake of going, I'll give my pitch, my service, do you want to buy? But in reality, actually, you just need to go and make really good relationships. So amazing that you had that experience and you did it so well, and obviously it was really successful for you. And I agree with you. Having this kind of dedicated time slot of going to meet in person definitely makes total sense. And yeah, if you book things too far in advance, people do tend to, they forget who you are, basically. They go, we're reschedule, not really knowing what they're rescheduling.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just can't get you out of my calendar for something more important.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because to be honest, I don't know how important you actually are.
For sure. Just touching on that networking thing, I say to people often, I'm probably the worst networker. I hate networking. I don't often go to networking events. Before that, I think that one of the very first events I went to, I can remember it was like when we just started up the business, and naturally anyone, when you're looking for advice, will always say, well, look, if you're looking to grow a business, we went to, I can tell you 2 small stories just related to networking and selling, because I forgot about this one thing in our first deal, or one of the first deals. So networking was, of course, you need to get out there, you need to meet people, and I thought, okay, well, I better do this. Off I go, and I remember walking into this pub, of course, there's somewhere, and I literally was there for 2 minutes, and I remember this guy coming up to me, and what do you do? Where do you come from? Like, and in this, he was kind of obviously sussing me out in his 30 seconds to kind of evaluate whether I was worth speaking to or not. And I took a real offense to that. Like my first experience was that, and that's what probably turned me into the worst networker. So when I went to these ones, I might only meet 1 or 2 people, but I'm always looking for that connection to, from a networking perspective. I'm not looking to try and sell you anything, but I'm looking to build that relationship. Do you follow sport? I love sport. And if I can just find one little connection, And I don't even, it's not even manipulated to try and do a deal. It's just like, actually, I want a connection with someone so we can talk about something outside of this event, because this event is very constructed around everyone trying to sell. So can I build these connections with family, sport, work that actually gives us a foundation to build off? So that was one of the things I found. But then just one story going back to the beginning where you asked me, like, what was one of the first deals? So when we won our first customer, I said there was a third one and I'd forgotten about them. And on this training event that we went to, the super salesman comes in and he's giving us a session on, well, if you want to be as good as me in sales, here's the playbook, and he said something. He said, if you've got a customer that is dragging their feet to sign a deal, you need to put some pressure on them to get the deal over the line. Sales is about closing deals, moving forward, closing deals. This is the super salesman here. He obviously knows what he's talking about. And we were in the middle of negotiations with a very big training company based here in the UK. I forget what their name was. And they were evaluating it. But the deal had been taking, like the sales process now, now I'm learning all these terms. Like the sales process was taking longer than expected. Super salesman says to me, you need to make sure this closes, go put some pressure on them. So, perfect. I'm going to take his strategy. Went back to the office, sent the lady an email, dear so-and-so. I didn't say the super salesman told me to do this, but in my opinion, the sales process has been taking very long. And if you don't sign by Friday, we're going to have to reevaluate the pricing that we've offered you in our proposal, thinking this is going to help close the deal and move it on. He wrote back to me and said, how dare you put pressure on us? I've spent the last month getting this in front of our executive committee, and now you're threatening me with a price change at the 11th hour. We're out. And that was it. This massive deal went away just like that. But again, a good harsh lesson to learn, know your customer, understand how they work. Sales, I've never known a deal to close more quickly than you ever thought. They always take longer than you expect because someone needs to sign off, someone has to make a decision. So that process is always more drawn out than you think, and trying to force it. And there'll probably be people out there who would go, well, we've managed to move that forward. And the super sales guy told me that. But in my experience, I learned a very harsh lesson. There's, of course, be proactive and try help move the deal along. Yeah. But in that case, I never ever threatened anyone again with a price rise. We had sent them a proposal because that went away very quickly.
It's funny the advice that you were given, because it definitely depends on what you're selling and who you're selling to, and what does pressure actually mean. Because in general, pressure sales don't work. Not from my perspective. Maybe from a B2C perspective, they can do, but actually they always result in a cancellation or something on those lines. So pressure selling in general, it just doesn't work. So putting pressure. But as a technique, there are things that you can do to help facilitate a faster decision-making process. And interestingly, those techniques are nothing to do about pressure. They're to do with support. So you're supporting them in their decision-making. So is there anything, this person that you reference emailing, is there anything that I can do to help support the decision-making process? Is there anything that you need from us? Would it be helpful to have a report from us, a presentation? Do you need me to speak to another stakeholder? So you're basically becoming their best friend as their support network, because this person who in enterprise sales we call the champion, the person who is facilitating your sale internally in the company, you are then championing them. You're their champion, right? And so they have everything that they need in order to ease it forward. And at the same time, it gives you the justification to keep reaching out, go, is there anything I can do to help with? So go, how's that meeting gone? When is it you're speaking to that stakeholder? And so you're managing them at the same time with the support that they need in order to actually facilitate it. So it's interesting, the sales advice that you got.
The difference between threat and support.
Yeah.
Very big difference. Because it was absolutely, and honestly, I remember it very clearly. It was, you've got to use what you can, and price is a very key thing. They want to lock in that price, they want to move in anyway. But that was just a small story. But as I learned, I definitely have become much more supportive in that, and actually that flipped me to kind of be if I think some of the subsequent deals when we were moving forward, sometimes I would, I say over support. I don't think you can ever over support. One of our company values is always trying to exceed customers' expectations. Like that's our mantra internally. That's a mission. And if you have that in mind, you're always trying to do a bit more than, not than you should, but a bit more than maybe what is expected. And then going forward, what I would try and do is, research, like do your research up front. Like key things, listen. Like I think so many salespeople, well, that's unfair. I was going to say salespeople don't listen. That's unfair. Not very good salespeople don't listen. Good salespeople do listen. And then try and put your, how do you solve that person's problem? But one of the bigger things I think is having a credibility factor to go, actually, our solution doesn't help you.
Yeah.
I honestly don't think that if I sold you this X amount of product or service, that is going to solve your problem. Like that credibility factor is huge, because in a couple of deals, and probably been more than one, like probably 10, 15, where I've gone, I just don't think we're the right fit for you. Instantly, the individual turns and goes, well, this is a credible individual I'm working with. They start trying to sell the product back to you to try and help them another problem. So it's having that blend of, being knowledgeable about what you're trying to do, listening to try and solve the problem, and then being credible and authentic in that process. We're all human beings at the end of the day. Like if we're not there to try and solve this person's problem, then we should be thinking about how we can solve it, even if it's a competitor's product, they're just trying to sell.
Yeah.
That's anything. Yeah,
absolutely. A friend of mine was gave their explanation of what is sales. That they used to be in sales, and the answer they gave was sales is simply the art of listening. And I think that's what you're kind of describing there. And it's true, because you have to be so attuned to what it is that they actually need, or what are the challenges that they're facing, in order to be able to provide them the right, or match them to the right solution. And absolutely, the very best salespeople will always be authentic and going, this isn't right for you. Now, if you're an organization that has a multitude of different solutions, that really works to your advantage.
Absolutely.
As soon as you go, this really expensive thing isn't the right decision, this one is. It's amazing how quickly people sign up. Because the trust that you build by going, actually, I don't think that one's right for you, is enormous. It's and interestingly, I was reflecting back on this pressure thing around the prices going up. Now, interestingly, you can use that technique if it's been set up to begin with as that. So if you say, right, so at the moment we've got a limited time offer, which for the next 14 days is available to you, should that or in enterprise sales it'd have to be longer. But the deadline for that is this. It's like the ongoing sale, right? So the people want to buy and sign up quickly, and it does work, but you can only do that if you've set it up in that way. It has to be already organized. What you can't do is backtrack and go, actually, our prices are going up.
Which is what I did, like these are learning experiences, and it's that transparency factor up front. I think as people, as long as they don't feel like they're being blindsided or all of a sudden the rules of engagement have changed, I think that's what they take offense to. What I certainly learned.
Yeah. But I think it's amazing to hear how you managed along the journey to figure out how to do all these different sales techniques with, by the sounds of it, no training whatsoever, right? But you figured it out, right? Because all these things are things that I would talk about as, well, that's a particular technique you're talking about, and this is a particular process, and that's a sales methodology, right? And all those things. And actually, just kind of bootstrapping and figuring it out as you go, these are all really concrete things you were doing. So, I think it's amazing how you were able to kind of organically just figure those things out.
Yeah, but I think it comes at a cost as well. So like I said earlier, I think founders are probably the best salespeople because they are intuitive. They're always looking to solve problems. So you learn quickly to solve the problem. So the selling process itself, one-on-one, I think people learn quickly in this type of role. The challenge comes in scaling a sales team. So now when you're trying to, because you can't replicate, like the benefit of owner-led sales is you can make a decision in that meeting whether you're going to change the price, change the product, change priorities there and there, which accelerates the sales process so much because you have ultimate control.
Yeah.
When you extend that to a sales team, and this is where I really struggled when we built out a sales team in North America, and we brought on a sales manager, and all the full thing. And we brought in a CRM and like all these things that you would expect to build a very robust sales engine. You forget that when you bring salespeople in, they're not Ricky Doyle. They can't make the decision on behalf of the business. So they have to seek approval for discounts. They are not, this is also quite difficult. I found was we were in quite a niche vertical there in terms of what we were trying to service clients with. It's hard to make people product experts in that. So as much as I learned those techniques, it was hard to replicate me in that sales, and that's what becomes really difficult, and then impacts growth, it impacts scale, because you're then churning, I think, salespeople, because naturally, I think you start off with, well, I'm not a very good salesperson. You're a salesperson. You come in and turn it around. So you build this engine, and the engine doesn't work. So naturally, you go, must be a capability thing. So actually, out with one salesperson, in with the next. Oh, the engine still doesn't work. Oh, so must be a sales leadership problem. Out with one, in with the it's the actual process that we haven't defined on how we want to work and how we're training and all those things. Like that's the deficiency, I think, when you haven't been schooled in sales, where you've maybe gone from someone who was just dialing on the phones to kind of get that first meeting. Then you move to kind of a sales role. Then you're an account manager. Then you're a sales leader, and you understand the whole engine. I think that's a deficiency certainly I have in me. I can sell, but building the sales engine is tough.
It's really interesting. So I was just thinking when I had a sales job, and it was a temporary thing. It was a silly thing. It was just doing lead gen, telesales over the phone, and the rest of it. But I was already a very experienced salesperson. And so I was going there just kind of temping in a way. And first thing I do, first day, I go, who's your best sales guy? Who's the one getting the best lead? This guy said, sit me next to him. I don't want to sit anywhere else. I'm sitting next to him. And then I just, for a day, just listening to everything he's saying, how he's saying it, what he's doing, what's he doing differently, all the rest of it. And then I'm a master of copying people. Absolute master. If you give me a sales pitch, normally instantly I'll memorize it and be able to set it back to you. And so everything that he did for a day, and then the next day I was beating him and did all the rest of it. And what I've noticed is that the same can be done from a sales methodology perspective. So, and that's what I do now, right? Is I create sales methodologies and sales automations for people, because all I need to do is sit in the business for a day and I can go, right, I know exactly the methodology for every single person. And it's all based on who's the top sales guy. So what you're talking about is a really common challenge, even for really mature companies. I remember going for an interview once at Amex. Amex, I consider one of the leading sales companies in the world, right? So bigger sales team than most, because really everyone that works there, apart from customer success, is just a sales guy, right? So you've got blocks, literally stories of people who are just selling at different levels. Anyway, I remember in the interview, and to be honest, I was overqualified at the time when I was going, so I was kind of interviewing the interviewee or the interviewer, going, and how do you do this? And what I learned from that interview, maybe it's changed now, it's a few years ago now, is that everything was completely manual. There was no like structure to anything. It was like, it was just all being relied on this manager knowing everything and dictating to his sales team. And I was like, that's ludicrous. And so something that I always did as a sales director is I'd create an intranet and break down the sales process from start to finish. So, right, you're doing your prospecting. This is your SOP, standard operating procedure, right? And then this is your discovery. These are all the questions, everything that you need to ask. Right, now this is your presentation. Here's a deck. You don't need to make one yourself because that often doesn't exist in companies. They don't even have a sales deck ready. Here's your deck, and here's your sales pitch. Here's all the things you need to cover. Here's your closing script, and just break that down. And immediately, the salesperson walks into a job and goes, oh, I know exactly what I need to do. Everything's broken down. And then coaching them with the right tone of voice, the right person, all these types, all the things that are outside of the process. But what you're describing is such a common issue. And something that I laugh with other salespeople is the shit show you walk into as a salesperson, because they walk into what you're describing, which is, right, just go sell. What's my selling? Well, there's the website you can have a read of. And there's the FAQs if you get stuck.
Were you listening to me in the last business?
But that is the common thing.
Yeah.
Like you're not like on your own there. That is the norm. And so I remember like when I was building a sales team for myself, my number one goal was make the best sales job. Like you walk in, you know what you're doing, you know what to say. Because I had all these bad experiences. Basically, every sales job I ever had was this bad experience, and I basically created for myself my own intranet everywhere I went because I was like, okay, no one's teaching me this. I'm gonna have to figure it out my own. But not everyone has the tenacity to do that, right? So they're just waiting.
You think you look at some of these big sales or the bigger companies, I think they're overloaded with salespeople because of the inefficiencies. So you kind of just the concept. I would imagine, and I've seen enough of the other side of these big scale sales teams of because it's a little bit inefficient and broken. Instead of having 10 amazing salespeople, what you do is you need 25 because you're going to have 10 good ones in there that are going to probably cover 90%, or maybe not as much that, but certainly 75% of targets. And the other 15, you're hoping to make up the other 25% and hopefully find one good one. And that's just the churn of people in and out there. And then you want to scale to a new market. Like, okay, well, we need probably 25 salespeople again with these. Yeah, it's I guess now become more sophisticated, but I would imagine you go back 10, 20 years, it probably wasn't as sophisticated. You're just like, oh, this is a good salesperson. He's got the gift of the gab. Exactly what I did. Look at the website. You know what we say? What's in that business? You just watch my videos. I told you about Winston and why we created it. And I mean, I've been selling this for years. And if you don't get it right and you get stuck in this thing, and I'm sure you've seen it probably more than me. But I can speak from our previous business. When I look at the deal profile of when we exited that business, when you looked at the kind of allocation of revenue, still the majority of the big clients were the ones that I found all those years ago. So they were like now 8-10-year-old clients. We'd grown them year over year, and actually the net new business, when you look at it from a financial, like a revenue perspective, because we hadn't built it, and this sits with me, no one else. This was a deficiency in my leadership. Not identifying and really focusing on that to build that machine that someone can come in and go, here's your training data. You just have to be authentic. Here's all the tools you need to go and do. Go and find the leads, go and call, but you've got the support as opposed to you've got the gift of the gab, go and make it happen.
Figure it out. Yeah. You told me in the interview you could sell ice to an Eskimo or here's your ice. And I got a whole bunch of Eskimos.
Yeah, so it's a real challenge for, I would imagine, that those small to medium-sized businesses trying to scale to the next level. Like, core revenue probably still comes from the founder deals. And
Yeah. Well, I had a client who had this really interesting model. As he scaled from $250,000 to 2.5 million in 2 years. Huge growth, right? So that's like skyrocket growth. Yeah. So quite a kind of strange case study in a way. And I said that I'd be fascinated to learn what did you do differently? And interestingly, there was two business partners, him and the other founder, still did all the sales. Yeah. But what they did was they just hired account managers to then be able to hand over. And that enabled this really fast growth where they could do the thing that they knew best, which was selling. But they didn't have to do any of the work there afterwards. And they just got really, really high quality account managers who knew how to nurture them, keep, retain, and so on, and expand. So yeah, I think it is definitely a common challenge for people then wanting to then replicate themselves and it takes time, and there's so many different strategies for that. Either you recruit very expensive salaries, someone who's sales director level, who's able to go in with the right skill set and the right level of maturity and experience and all the rest of it, or you nurture from the ground up. And there's kind of pros and cons to both. You nurture someone into your kind of ideal person who is then bought on with you. Maybe you give them some kind of share options, so they're really invested in the company and so on. Or you have to go for enormous salaries. But enormous salaries you can get it really wrong, because some people get enormous salaries really not necessarily justifiably, right? So it is a difficult balance.
Well, I've got this analogy that I kind of talk about internally, even at day one. And I think this is the journey I went on in my mindset. And when you talk about these expensive salaries, so startups will go and they'll hustle and the founders will do the sales, and now it's moving. Okay. And if you get to this point, this inflection point, and I call it the valley of doom, so you kind of, but across the valley of doom, is like the holy grail. Like this is where the businesses are flying. Like you can see money just being printed. Well, that's in your head. So you think to yourself, I've got to get across there. So you say to your team, okay, look, you guys continue to run the business. I'm going to go down this valley. I'm going to climb up the other side. I'm going to go find someone over here that's really, really good, this high top salesperson. Because if I can bring them back here, they're going to take us to the other side. So you go, okay, great. And eventually you get there and you start meeting these top salespeople from these really like Google, X whatever, link, like all these, oh, wow, these guys. And you start chatting to them, and they go, "Yeah, well, I turned our division around. Was it 5 million in revenue? I took it to 25 million. Yeah, man, a lot of hard work, but wow, imagine you could do that. I don't even need to go to 25 million. I just need to go from 500,000 to 2.5 million. Yeah. They go, what's it going to take for you to join us? Because now they're disillusioned. Yeah, they've done all this at Google. And you kind of go, they go, look, it's going to cost you in dollar to pound to 150 grand. You go, steep, but you've gone 5 million to 25 million. I think we're going to do this. And I want like some share options and that. They go, okay, let's do it. So you hire a helicopter because you don't want to take your fancy salesperson down the valley of doom, So you fly them across, you build this thing, this bridge, and then you kind of land them on the other side. You go, okay, let's make it happen. And the first thing they go is, okay, good. Where's the CRM? You go, no. What's CRM? What's CRM? No, you must have Salesforce or something here. You go, no, we don't have anything. I thought you would build it. Oh, geez, I've never built a CRM before because that's on the other side. We invested 25 there. Yeah, and that's why this machine really. Okay, don't worry. I think I've got someone I can probably call and we can get the CRM going. Okay, great. So what's the marketing budget?
Your salary.
I fired you because we don't need marketing because we've got the sales. No, look, I mean, for us to start doing this fancy calculation to get to 1 million ARR, I need like 250, 300 grand in And what you find is like they actually can't build the sales process. They're really very good at executing the sales process and leading it and managing it, but building it from scratch, very few people have got that skill that I found on that journey to kind of go, what, I can build it and I can help you get there. It's one or the other.
It's so funny you should say, because that's what I like doing. That's the bit I'm good at. And then I'm looking off. So I like being in for like 4 to 6 months, build the engine, get it all there, and then somebody else can replace me. And then, it's really interesting because you're right. Lots of people are very, very good at managing the engine, but building it is a totally different skill set. And actually, my skill set is better at building the engine, and I'm less skilled at managing the engine because that requires people to manage all the rest of it.
Yeah, it's the right people in the right jobs doing the right things. And
yeah. But I think that again, it's a great analogy. I think it's a really great analogy because I think that again, that will be such a common mistake that people make. They go for this big salary thinking they'll know how to do it. But actually, they're so used, especially in your big enterprises, you're so used to going, oh, well, I've got the accountancy team and I've got the legal team to draw up the contract and the marketing team. I've got a proposal that I need to put together. They'll put that together for me. And the sales operations department will, when you're used to utilizing all these departments, it's a totally different ballgame to going, right, startup, one hat. I'm sales ops. Now sales recruiter, now sales manager. Now I'm doing an enterprise sale, Yeah.
And it's difficult, when you kind of look at that, also new business versus existing business. So I guess we fall into the trap, like new logos is always better than building existing. And actually, if you just spend less time, and again, I'm not preaching to I look at myself, just reflecting on my journey. Probably we did a good job of some of our core customers. Then we got caught in this. Actually, we need more logos. Get the sales team in, and you're trying to scale. It's almost artificial scale. You grow through just sheer efforts. Spin the wheels as fast as you can, and you will move forward. But it's not enough traction to the effort in spinning. And fortunately, we had there weren't many good things for COVID across the globe, but for me, it gave me this moment to reflect. I didn't travel as much, and when I looked at our model, actually, and when I really started to learn about sales and what do we need to do it? It's actually sometimes less is more. So actually do less new logos, but get traction with the accounts that you have. Actually get them generating revenue, as opposed to what we were doing before. I just fly to Australia. We had a small business in Australia, because you run out of enough logos and enough leads. So that new market has to be the way to go. So let's go to Thailand, because surely the people who want our services there, and you're just spinning so many plates, and you're moving forward. So it's a false positive in terms of, because little incremental bits of business come in. You go, great. Well, we've got at least one client in Australia. You don't realize how much it costs to put the person in there. But it looks nice that you've got a new logo and we're in a new market, as to maybe just going back to, here's our core client. Can we build a new product for them? What else can we do to maximize the revenue from this? Or is it tapped out, but there's opportunities in other ones where you probably can just spend a little more time listening to solving more of the problems, and go, actually, I didn't realize you had a division in Australia. We're already working with you. How do we enable that business unit in our partnership to go and I'm happy to fly to Australia and go and teach the teams, but just a slightly different mindset of actually less new logos, more intention with existing customers. Sometimes is, in my experience, which I didn't do, by the way, because I'm chasing new logos, but maybe I've been better served doing that than trying to build a sales team and build an engine and do those things. Those things will come in time as you gather momentum. But
I couldn't agree with you more. And again, this will be, lots of people will talk about this type of thing who are really experienced in kind of growing their business, that actually the most underutilized pipeline that you've got is the one that's already your customer, right? So it's just, it's what else does my customer need? And you either create new solutions for challenges they're facing, or you've already got those solutions. And it's just a case of helping get them to understand that that's something you can also help them to achieve or solve, or whatever it is that you do. So I think that would be a great piece of advice for anyone who is building a business, is go, well, my customers right now, how can I serve them even better? And as you say, your company motto, how can we over deliver? And over delivering can also be over delivering by adding additional solutions to their to whatever it is you're doing for them. So I think that's a really interesting reflection. I think you're absolutely right. I think that is a very, very common mistake, is just keep chasing new logos. And it's always looking out there when actually you've got probably everything you need, and less is more. And often that's the same with, and I've gone through this journey myself, is in terms of like trying to provide every possible service to go, actually, no, just get really, really, really good at that one, in every possible way. Because, when I first started agency and a client would go, do you do this? I go, yep. And then I'd be like, right, let's find someone who can do it. And they go, somebody else would be like, do you do that? Yep. And then actually spinning all these wheels, not really knowing what these wheels even are, or spinning these plates, sorry. And then what I've realized, and actually more recently in the past kind of 12 months, and going, actually, this is the one I really enjoy, and I just want to be really amazing at this one. And funnily enough, that works way more to my advantage. So it's a fascinating thing, but it's taken me to learn it, even though all entrepreneurs say it, and all, you read it and hear it. Learning through your own experience is another thing.
Without a doubt. People can tell you 100 times, and we've all been to the conferences, and until you feel it and live through it, that's the only time you learn it. And it's either had to cost you. I always believe you learn the most when it costs you something, and it might not just be monetary value. So it either costs you time or it's cost you money. And when one of those, either of those items have cost you, you learn very quickly to go, I don't want to do that again. I don't want to spend another 3 months trying to do it. But the counter argument, just going back to what you're saying, I guess in the very early stages when you don't know what you're doing, I think there's just a natural learning curve to do as many. Yes, we do that. No, we don't. I think there's a difference between kind of like getting started and getting going to that next phase, which is around scale. Like, how do we actually move into a different area? There, I think probably going to what you just kind of said, Leslie, is going, actually, what are we really good at as a business? Let's focus in on that. Let's go find more clients in this thing. We know what our ideal customer profile looks like. Let's go just find more of those, as opposed to going horizontal and diluting our offering across many things. And I think that certainly I can speak from that experience. We tried to go horizontal. We probably should have just kept it tight because that would have given us more scale. But in the beginning, if I don't think, if just thinking that journey, if I'd have said no, actually, like going to the first customer and they may have gone, well, are you prepared to drop your price to $25? Pricing is a hard one. Are you prepared not to? Because actually, I remember the very first one our offering was just infrastructure as a service. So you would go and use the tools, and they went, look, we need content, we need the step-by-step instructions. And if I had gone, no, well, we only do the infrastructure, like at that stage, we wouldn't have got to the next stage.
Yeah.
At the beginning, you have to be scrappy. You have to just try and make it happen where you can. But I think it's that scale piece where you've got to rediscipline yourself in some respects. So, okay, can't be scrappy anymore. What are we good at? Let's go find more of this. And then other markets come into play, but you still do the same thing.
I think that's a really good word to use for that, is discipline, just redisciplining yourself. And the other part for me was, in addition to the discipline of going, actually, I just want to be really good at the thing, is also figuring, by saying yes to lots of things, I recognize the things that I didn't enjoy doing. You go, they're all things I can sell. Basically, I can sell anything. As a business owner, I can choose to sell anything. I can start selling cheese if I want to sell cheese. But I don't enjoy selling all that other stuff, and I don't enjoy selling as providing it as service. But I really enjoy this one. So I think it's been a journey for me to go, oh, what is it I really, really, really enjoy, authentically enjoy, and then that's the thing I can deliver best on anyway because I'm so passionate about it.
Yeah. And it touches on that kind of authenticity and credibility of salespeople. When they sell the thing they love, then it's not. I don't even believe it's selling. It's storytelling. It's immersing yourself, wanting to solve, because you're so happy with where you're working and what you're delivering, and it's going to make a difference, that you don't have to try and use the clever sales techniques to close, and that people buy into it. And I think all walks of life, everyone's selling in some capacity. For me, if I think of what are the best restaurants you can go to, for me, our favorite place to go is a small place in Crawley. It's a Turkish restaurant. I mean, plastic tablecloths, but you go in there, they know your name, they know what you like to eat. The food is always immaculate, and it's reasonably priced. And I kind of use that as this business model for anyone who wants to be successful. If you want people to come back, just treat them well, offer them a good product at a good price. And if you're hungry, so if I'm hungry and I want to go somewhere, I can always go there and it'll always be the same. In any business that I'm involved in, I think to myself, I want customers to think that they can pick up the phone anytime and I go, look, I will try my best for you. I might not be able to solve it, but I'm telling you, I'll give you my best effort in trying to get that done. And that trust element, I think, is what really drives kind of the great salespeople and great sales organizations. When customers, you can buy and sell from anyone, and you look at the process. When someone leaves a company, a really good salesperson leaves, and they go to a competitor because
all the clients go with them.
All the guys go with them because there's no loyalty to the company per se. It's to that person that's going to solve their problem. And that's a good and bad thing. But
it's definitely a good and bad.
The small thing of this kind of family restaurant that I can go to, I can always get good food, reasonably priced. I don't need the frills. Actually, I don't really need the frills. I just want that core delivered really well at a price that I feel is reasonable. And they could probably charge me another 10%. I'd still feel it's reasonable because of everything else they give at the same time.
Yeah. Interesting. It's and the other thing that you were saying indirectly was the consistency of it. There's a marketing speaker called Rory Sutherland, and he does a lot of talks around marketing strategies. And in one of his talks, he talks about why is McDonald's so successful? And he says it's not because they make the best burger; it's because they're consistently shit. You know what you're getting. You always know that the burger you're going to get is exactly the same. It's never better. It's never worse. It's the same. And it's true. Because as soon as I go to a restaurant, if I go to a restaurant again and I'm getting a slightly different experience, immediately I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm going to go again, because I don't know that the following time is going to be a good time. Is it going to be a bad time? And I think that's really the success of these major franchises, is they figured out how to replicate so the experience is identical again and again and again. Probably the hardest part of that is customer experience or customer success, because you have to make sure the human is on point and, you know, they're going to be smiling and, you know, all that. And how do you monitor that? How do you control that all the time? Interestingly, I was talking to someone earlier today about the Hard Rock Cafe, and they've got a really, really clever recruitment strategy for their waiters and waitresses, which is they recruit people who are from have got hospitality degrees or qualifications. So they're trained, you know, they have a qualification in customer service, and often they'll have 2 or 3 languages. Genius. You know, I think such a clever way of making sure that you've got a consistency, because again, Hard Rock Cafe is a great example of just everything done to perfection everywhere. You know, so all of the decor, fantastic. The people who work there, fantastic. The music, fantastic. The food, fantastic. You know, the attention to detail, everything is fantastic. Like the Ivy would be, for example. You know, these big things.
Absolutely. Look, and you're right, it's hard to maintain, but I guess if you build one of my other kind of part of our mission statement is like my job as the leader of day one and in the previous business of Prax Labs, and I truly bought into this, was my job is to create an environment for people to excel, and really that's it. Like, that's a leadership thing, and certainly someone at the top of the organization, live and breathe the values, take pain away, just allow people to excel. And you know, we talked about earlier, as I mentioned, like all these sales conferences and stuff, and normally I go to sales conference or leadership conference, Glazer, like the same old thing. And I don't know why it's the second time I've mentioned Crawley, but I went to this very weird again, it was in the early days, event at a hotel on the roundabout in Crawley. It was a terrible venue, but funny enough, the speaker there, out of all the conferences I've ever been to, was that line. He said that, I took it from him, and I wish I could remember his name so I could credit him with it. But he said, my job as the leader of this business is to create an environment for people to excel. And that was probably 15, 18, maybe not, 15 years ago. I went to that conference, maybe 60, I don't know. But that stuck with me. And I think if you get that right, then potentially when you talk about the recruitment piece and the people piece, they want to be there. And I think if you want to be there, same as salespeople, you want to be there, you believe in your product, like you love that. You love it, like, to welcome people into, I love this place. And it treats me well, so I want to treat you well. That's where that dynamic, I think, it's hard for, not everyone can get it right. Disgruntled salespeople are obviously not going to be the best. They're probably more capable than they're showing, but if they, my commission's only 0.2% on this deal, and actually my sales manager, he's never, whatever it is, they're never going to perform.
Yeah.
So to get that level of consistency, it also is a leadership thing as much as an individual thing and a standards thing.
I think that's great. I've heard some. I don't know if you've ever heard of Gary V. I don't know how to pronounce his surname.
Yes, I do know.
Yeah, Gary V. So something that I've heard him say in one of his kind of videos before is that similarly to you, you know, his goal for everyone who works at a company is basically do the thing that you're enjoying most. So are you really succeeding in having a content life? So whether your content life is becoming a millionaire, or it's just having a great family life, or having a nice work-life balance, I want to make sure that you're happy. And I think that what I loved about hearing him say that was, here's someone in kind of, you know, top rich list in the world, and that's his methodology, because actually in corporate land, that's really rare. So by the sounds of it, you're a great person to work for as a people's manager, but it's really, really rare. Or certainly from my experience, maybe it's less rare than I know from my own personal experience. But as far as I know, and having discussions with other people, that's not what people experience at all. And I think you're absolutely right. You know, so if you have the culture right, naturally you have good customer service, naturally, because you really enjoy it, and you're feeling really content as an individual working in. But my experience is that in most corporate worlds, it just ain't like that.
I'm with you. Yeah, if I remember the days that I worked in corporate world, so if someone had to ask me what the company values were, I'd be like, what?
First in, last out. End on. Make sure you're at the pub on Thursday.
That might be a little unfair to them, but I you know, it's whether it's hard or not, I'm not sure. But Yeah, it's. I think if you can get it right, it's difficult to get it right, but I think it becomes a big enabler for all these good things to happen. And I think it is a mindset piece. Maybe if we look, the world sales, we're all driven. There's nothing you should drive me crazier when used to hear some of our big clients and the big corporates like end of quarter, like we've got to make quota, like we've got to hit the number, and you're phoning up on the day before, so the end of this month, no doubt would be like 25th, like we're phoning clients to get them over the line, like pressures, like
Yeah,
we've got to close this, and instead of pressuring from a where I went wrong, trying to make the price more expensive. What they do to close the deal, they actually make it cheaper. So they lower the value to get it over the line, just so they can hit the number. And I go like, surely that is like a bad deal. I know you hit the number, but now we've got to carry this deal like for the next 3 years. You've just sold a 3-year deal at half the price we would normally. Like, why? Well, because you wanted me to hit quota. Like, yeah, but couldn't you have come to me and just gone, can we see if we let this run into next week? I think I can close it at probably 90% of what we're doing now. But that's the part of sales. I've never worked in that type of environment, so it's hard for me to comment on it. But it seems counterintuitive to the way the business wants to run. So if you look at the business as opposed to the sales engine, I know the number is important,
yeah.
but sometimes it becomes a bit of a vanity metrics, because no one's looking at what type of deals make up the number, and that I've never understood why that's pressure. Just don't get it. I don't get it.
The reason why that is, Ricky, is because you're logical. And it is absolute madness. I mean, I've been in these environments, but the first podcast I recorded with a guy called Code, he'd been in enterprise for a long time, a long time.
Yeah.
Very experienced, gone up the corporate ladder to director and all this kind of thing. And he talks in detail around, what are some of the reasons sit behind that. And basically it's board level pressure, if you've got hierarchical chain and you've got board of directors, and then you've got directors, and then you've got manager, and so on, well, at each level there's this intense pressure to hit target, because people at the top here, they don't really care about the humans that are sitting down here. They just care that the figures on the spreadsheet look correct, right? And the board are also under pressure from shareholders, so the shareholders really don't care about all of this stuff. They just care, is my dividends going to be the right, and is the valuation of the company going up? And so typically speaking, the larger enterprises, that tends to be the case. And in my own personal experience, on a smaller level, in the kind of 20 to 50 bracket kind of employee size company, if you've got an investment board, the same thing happens, just on a much smaller scale. So the investors, if you've had a VC, especially, the VC often have a level of pressure which are insisting. So again, they haven't got time for the story of the human that's sitting behind it. They're like, has it been hit? Yes or no? If no, it's out, and if in, you move on to the next quarter, and it's this kind of rotation. But I would consider that quite a toxic way of running a company, but that will be the majority.
Yeah, and it's weird because anyway, like we'll never solve that on this on this podcast episode. But it has always fascinated me, like why so many bad deals get done. Anyway.
And Ricky, what I'd love to do is just ask you a bit about, so what is it you do now? So because we spoke quite a lot about your previous business, but we haven't spoken that much about what you do now.
Look, thanks, Adam. So, look, when I kind of touched on it towards the end of that story, when I finished with the last business, started a couple of other things, and I realized I had one more business in me. I'd taken all this. That was about 16 years at Practice Lab, and we didn't have any investment, so I had full autonomy to grow and do whatever I wanted in that business, always with the intention of making it as successful as possible. So I knew I couldn't just stop. I had one more business in me. I was driven by kind of 3 key things. The first one was, if I started a business, had to have purpose. I'm interested in how we make a difference in people's lives. Can we impact people to be better? I probably could have maybe opened a string of coffee shops, which would be great for me personally to go sit and drink coffee every day because I love that. But there's no real kind of direct impact on people's livelihoods. Then the second thing for me was, there's like a startup is really difficult, and I'm sure you speak to a lot of business owners. Go, it's tough, and it's relentless. I used to, and still do now, kind of when I wake up, I feel like you're putting your battle fatigues on in some respects. If you really want to make this work, you've got to go to battle every day, mentally, figuratively. It's a real battle if you want to move forward.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of tough things about it, but one of the key things for me, and someone actually said this to me. It wasn't my own thoughts, unfortunately, but they said to me, the best thing about a business, like starting a business, is you get to choose the people you work with. That has resonated with me through the whole journey. And I went, okay, well, if I could find a business that had impact, and instantly I could imagine the team that I would want to work with again. And that was, well, what do you want to do? And I come from this kind of skills development world. One of the things I noticed was actually, at Practice Labs, we had put 1 million people on our platform, and these were paying students. So I think I'd read something about the skills gap. And right in the beginning of this, when you asked me to introduce myself, 1999 was the first technology skills gap that was talked about. Y2K was coming. Every computer in the world was going to fall over. Planes were going to fall out of the sky. And it drove this big boom in technology, certainly from a learning perspective. We needed more qualified people. So, in 2023, when I was thinking about this, why are we still talking about the skills gap? I know we got capable people out there, and I hear all the time about businesses wanting skilled talent. Like, what's missing? Like, where's the bridge between those two things? The supply is there, the demand is there, but we're still talking about this. Now, skills gaps will always evolve because technology evolves, but we shouldn't have the broad skills gap that I think we talk in, So I thought, well, I wonder how we bridge these two things together. So maybe we're just looking for talent in the wrong way. And I said my journey. The lady's name was Sharon. Sharon saw something in me that I hadn't seen in myself, and she went, "Here's the opportunity. I'm going to match you to this." And she gave it to me and changed my journey. And I was like, well, I wonder if we could do a similar thing. So where you see beyond just people's CVs, people are more than the sum of their CVs, and you can now start to bridge this. Here's the talent pool. Here's the need. Can we bring it together? So that was this matching thing, very simply, like giving someone a day one. So my day one was, there's your opportunity, go make it happen. Companies are looking for day one talent. They have to evolve. So how do we do it in a smart way? So just to give you a broader context than just we match talent to entry level, early career talent to early career jobs. I think one of the key things in matching is one thing. Everyone's doing that. You on your CV have said you've got these skills. This job description says we need these skills. Let's match them. But if you think about something like an Uber, an Airbnb, like these are the things I was dreaming about. Like, how do you do this at scale? Like, solve this as a global problem. And I think of that Uber model, and Uber is like, it's not just a ride sharing thing. So of course I need a lift. I've got a car, I can give you a lift. Bring the two together. I think the really clever part is the verification of each party. So if I want a lift, I've got an app, I've got my credit card on there, where my location services are. I'm like a trusted entity. The drivers go through their vetting process as much as possible, are trusted entities. So when those two things match, it becomes this trusted transaction, which becomes repeatable and scalable. So I was like, okay, so how do we do that from a talent and job perspective? So what we do day one is we verify that talent up front. So we kind of ensure that if you were to match to someone, they are at least at the very baseline what I'd call a desk-based information worker. They can use a PC, they're digitally literate. So we kind of take that part away. We do the verification piece, and then we say to the companies we work with, you also need to be a credible employer now. So if we bring in good talent, there's no application process at day one. You have to go and invest some time up front to show that you are ready to work. You are day one ready. You become part of that talent pool. And we say to employers, if you want access to our talent, you need to be a credible employer. You need to look beyond just the the CV of someone. What are the values of your company? Do you match and align to that? Are you looking at people's aspirations? What is the essence of them? So we do all these things. So when we bring it together, ultimately we're looking for something that, one, reduces the skills gap, because that exists, but also stop this churn of people wanting a job, moving on. So actually, if you take not necessarily more time, because we do it in a fast, efficient manner, but if you bring those things together with the right people into the right roles in the right organizations, actually you give them this opportunity to grow with the business, to stay there longer term, and build the culture and those types of things. So look, our official line is we're a technology-based recruitment as a service company, and we exist to kind of really bring early career talents in digital and tech roles matched to jobs where people are looking for that talent, and we do it in a smart way with the platform. This whole experience I had in that hands-on learning, that's really what we bring, because we talked about the deficiencies in the selling process, but because of confidence, maybe good salespeople are confident. How many people are overlooked because they couldn't answer a questionnaire? They just froze. Oh my gosh, it's an exam. I don't know how to. But if you ask them to go and do it in a hands-on way, they're more than proficient to do it. So that's what we focus on, the practical skill element. Can you do the job? This is the key output of it. On next Monday, if you've hired someone, can they go into your office? Can they actually add value and impact to the business on day one? That's what we want to bring to you, and that's what we do.
I love that. It's interesting. As you were saying that, I was thinking around if you were to ask every single driver on the planet, do you know your highway code well enough to pass the test, the theory test? It would be a hard zero, zero passes. But if you ask them to go get in the car and drive, everyone can drive, right? Yeah. I think
varying levels. Some would be really good. Some might need a little bit of coaching, but they're still proficient enough to get from A to B.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so I think it's an absolutely valid service to provide, because as you say, if someone's having to do an exam, in a way, I think exams are silly. It doesn't really give much insight except from how good is someone at really memorizing something and and then regurgitating information. At school, I found school easy because I said I'm a copycat.
Yeah.
I can I've got a photographic memory, so I can just read, regurgitate. A-star student. So all through school and college, it was a piece of cake for me. But ask me the day after any one of those questions, and it's like it immediately has left. Right, so it's not really any. For me, there was no justification to any of my qualification, right? Because it's just the photographic memory. So I think what I love for hearing about what you do is that it's a hands-on approach. Can you actually do the thing? And the same, I love the fact that you validate the companies, because how many people get recruited by companies and they're like, oh my goodness, I wish I had spoken to someone in this company before I joined, because they would have told me I shouldn't have joined.
Going back just to my story, I told you about the first college I went to. I had to do this aptitude test, and they said to me, you shouldn't get into IT. Look, I happened to build that IT company. We serviced them. We trained 1 million more people in IT. And if I had have been someone different, I may have just looked at that and gone, absolutely, you're right. I won't try. I won't go to the second college to see what it could be, because you've told me, because of my test, I shouldn't do this. And maybe all these little things in my past have led to this day one piece going, look, and that shouldn't discount someone who's really good at tests. For me, more than anything, is how do you level the playing field, make it fair and equitable for someone like you who's got a great photographic memory, someone who hasn't, but can we all do the job? Can you come and prove that you are capable of doing your job from day one? That's really what it's about, as opposed to trying to skew any metrics to cater for one side of the spectrum or other. It's just let's bring it. Everyone's got the same chance. Went to Cambridge, went to no college, and you're self-taught. As long as you can prove, and we remove a lot of the bias elements, so we just become a talent ID. There's no names. There's no what school you went to. Can you do the job? Yes or no? Yes, great. You match to this opportunity. We'd love to talk to you. And only like we hired someone through our platform, and actually when we went to the interview the first time, we didn't even know the person's name. Yeah, and so it's quite daunting as well. So it creates a different mindset.
Blind dating.
It's a little bit like that. But what it gave us the opportunity to do is we knew the individual was capable because they'd already shown us. Now it's a case when you have the conversation, you're not trying to go, is Alistair, I wonder if he can really tackle that spreadsheet that we need to do him to do on like that. It was more like, hi, great to meet you. Like our conversation today. You bring two people together, you meet. Can you have that conversation? Is there a natural fit? Absolutely. This person, I can see them work in our organization. Like you're not worrying about in the back of your mind, why am I working to reject this person? Because I think that's recruitment is you're always looking for, why shouldn't I take this person on? Because I have to be careful of making a bad hire. Like I want us to flip that to go, get less people rejected. So when you're looking at that final pool, like who's the best fit for this? I'm looking at every positive opportunity to bring the right talent into the business, as opposed to, no, this person worked in public sector. I don't think they're going to be really good in the private sector. So let's eliminate them.
Well, having been an employer myself, I know the challenge of it. But the last time I was hired, so I put an advert on LinkedIn, and within a week, I think I had like 96 applications. And it's like, and actually my process, I don't look at CVs because I don't think it justifies anyone. I do it based on, so I'll put together a questionnaire, and so I'll ask them so I can know by their answer, do they know what they're talking about or not? All of their, even their previous experience is totally irrelevant because I've hired people before that seem to have the great experience. Have no idea what they're doing. And the same vice versa. People have no idea what they're doing, but learn so. I remember hiring this girl. She just learned so quickly. I mean, she faster than I could possibly imagine. I was like, geez, I was so impressed. She was just amazing. But she had no skills, no experience whatsoever, but learned literally within like weeks. It was just incredible. So I think that has enormous validation, especially in today where so much is AI driven, right? So it's like an AI will write my CV, and then an AI will choose my CV, and an AI will probably hire me. So
I'll just become an agent. I'll become an AI agent. That's on my CV. AI agent for hire.
I wonder if you could just create a whole bunch of fake CVs and see which one gets recruited.
Well, I think those things have happened. Just changing them slightly, the bias in it. But anyway, that's a challenge we're trying to overcome. Is like, how do you just level the playing field?
So it's just touching very quickly on. So this is a kind of a newer venture in was it a newer venture? You've obviously had a really successful business already. You learnt the hard way how to sell, how to sell your service. How do you do it now?
Still hard to sell the service. It's more sophisticated. Do you know what's different the second time? This is what I would say is, selling is still the most difficult thing that we do. Like everything else, we're quite sophisticated because we have a really good team. We have a really strong team in our sales group as well. I guess what we're learning much quicker about what works and what doesn't. So there's still this very, and look, you'll know this, like a new product to market. We're trying to do it in a completely different way in an industry that is so rigid and quite not receptive to change. So you've got not receptive to change. You've already touched on it. You've got this whole AI revolution. So it's not an instant, oh, do you know what? I need a coffee. We just need to go and create the best coffee out there. We're changing the mindset of people as well. And we're having to do a couple of things. But anyway, to answer your question, I tell you, we've just fallen into a trap, and I'm happy to share this actually now it's still prospecting is the tough piece. Prospecting, we probably, we started really selling from the beginning of the year. We fortunately have someone, we have the CRM, we have the marketing automation, all those automation things that you talk about. Like we've learned now how to fail quickly, because I think that's in this early stage, fail quickly, try something else. The one thing that we looked at, which is a challenge, is focusing on what I call like the micro benefits of the service and maybe not the macro benefits. So micro benefits being, I've just told you some of the stuff. We do the validation with this hands-on lab, and we do this AI interviewing thing that gives people confidence. And all of those micro benefits are amazing, but they're quite narrow in the audience, especially when you're prospecting. So we've had to drag the messaging up to, so this our challenge is messaging. So we have to go back to these three key things: save you time, save you money with better quality. And that's what we try, we're leaning into from a prospecting perspective to go, actually around the recruitment thing, could we save, it's too expensive for us. Yes, we're interested in at least having a look. The thing with sales is you're not going to sell on the first hit, but what you want is a follow-up question or at least some type of conversation where I can now listen to you, help you solve your problem, and could we be the solution? But when we were very narrow in our messaging, we can send it out to 10,000, 100,000 people. At that moment in time when email arrives, you're like, your audience is quite narrow. And the really, really interested ones, because in isolation, the one component isn't making a big enough difference for you to pick up the phone and say, yes, I want this. But it's in your mind to go, yeah, that's really useful. But is it saving me time, saving me money with better quality? Like you have to build that for yourself. So anyway, so selling is still tough, but it's an evolution process, and we're making traction. But of course, you've lived in this world. It's never fast enough. It's never enough. There's never enough leads. There's never enough prospects. There's never enough customers. And that's what keeps us going. The challenge to see, can we solve this to get more of those? So
yeah, I've discussed this with other business owners. The progression of business always feels like a slow moving iceberg. It's like, it's really like you're trying to put a jet engine on it and it goes, nope. Two jet engine. Nope. And it just goes, it doesn't change the speed, it just carries on. It's funny when you've got a new kind of product to sell, and you're learning how to pitch. I've experienced this lots and lots and lots of times. It just, well, for me, in my experience, it takes me lots of conversations just to figure out what is it that's really resonating, because I'll however experienced I am in sales, and I'll kind of have a script I think will work and I think what will resonate based on what I think the customer is the pain point. And then when I talk to them, I recognize none of that, and then it's only in those dialogues I go, it's that, it's that, it's that, it's that. Okay. And then you start to perfect it, but you need to have a couple dozen of those before you start to really pick up on what's the biggest, or at least in my experience anyway.
But touching on to what you said earlier as well, when you're building that process out, where you kind of go, here's the deck, this is what we need you to ask. Actually, and I found this out I was doing it in the last couple of weeks. I had to do a presentation for someone, and where I kind of stumbled into this messaging thing was like I had to write the one line, like, what is day one? Like I understand the value we bring and how we bring it. I mean, this is my brainchild, but in one sentence, I had to write like, what do we actually do? And that's what, okay, well, what do we do? Because you have to have that anchor at the top that kind of holds it all together. So you can have the thing. So we can now say a technology-led recruitment and service business. The follow-up question of what does that mean? Great. I'm glad you asked, because it's this. But until you have to write that one sentence, and because we're all moving so quickly, we're all looking at further down the stack around messaging, all these core benefits and how they make you fit. But that one sentence, if you get that right, actually you can build everything below that. I think like for our mistake is we built it from the bottom, and now we've had to drag it up, but not from top down. So if you do top down, sometimes you make it too light, where there's not enough meat around your messaging in any case. So you've got these very flimsy, we help you hire better. Okay, what does that mean? It's a great strap line, and it kind of tells you what we do, but it doesn't really tell you what we're about. So anyway, that messaging piece, which directly impacts sales. You've said you want your script for your salesperson to be able to phone up a prospect. So as they're prospecting, look, challenge, no one picks up the phone anymore. If you're not in my contact book, forget about it. Leave a message. I'll call you back. If it's a salesperson, you'll never get a call back. Recruitment. Like delete. So it's hard to get people's attention. So when you do get their attention, their messaging becomes really important. Are you talking about the right things at the right time?
Yeah.
To help that piece. So anyway,
I think out of the things, for me as a customer, if I were your customer, I think the things that from all the things you described, the ones that resonate with me, going, yeah, that's something that would be really helpful for me. And then I've got two in my mind. One of them is proven through practical application. So they're proven that they can do. So we've tested. We know that from a practical perspective, not just through tests, but practically, we know that they can do what they say they can do. And I think the sales point from my perspective, and if you were talking to me, is like, what are the challenges? But like, have you ever hired someone who says that they can do all this stuff and they've got the experience to do all this stuff, and then it turns out they can't do any of that stuff? That's the challenge that I have personally experienced, and probably the one that would resonate with me when you say it to me and go, well, we actually put everyone through a practical application. I don't know how you would word it. It's your business, right? But practical application test where we actually get them to do the thing that you're looking for them to do. So we know that they can do it before you even have the interview. So they're proven from a practical perspective. And the other thing is, and I think that this would resonate more with HR directors than it does with me personally, which is taking the bias out, because I don't do that in mine anyway, because I don't look at CVs. So but taking the bias out of your decision-making process. Because it doesn't matter if someone's gone to Harvard or whether someone's gone to college. If they've got the same skill set, we're going to prove it through a practical application. I think that's how it probably would speak to me.
Yeah, and thanks for the feedback. I appreciate it. And I think this is what we're finding is in conversation, people love it and get it because you can feel it. Everyone, goes back to this prospecting piece, like one too many. Like, how do you find a message? It's broad enough to get people to do something next. That's more of the challenge, is prospecting to get enough in the pipeline. You've got this individual salespeople prospecting and phoning, and conversations are great and people fall in love with it and want to be part of it, but that's not scalable.
Yeah. I've run email campaigns for recruitment companies, and I found that the content strategy that worked the best was really simple. So, hi, first name, obviously custom variable there. And then, are you currently recruiting at the moment? Question mark. Next line. I'd be happy to check our talent pool to see and ping over some suggestions if you would like me to. So if they're in a place where they're struggling with recruitment, immediately you get responses going, yeah, I'll have anyone that you, and then that's just a way of getting the appointment. On the appointment, go, well, what we're going to do is we're going to match you with the right person. What type of skill set do you need? And then it gives you an opportunity. So having done those, that's the ones that I found, because I tried lots of different strategies with cold email marketing for recruitment companies. So I used to only work with recruitment companies for a period of time because it works so well. Cold email works really well in general but you're right, you have to get someone just at the moment they're recruiting, but not just the moment they're recruiting, just the moment they're struggling with recruiting. And, so it's that. But you just from working with clients, what I found is that my clients would then build these huge pipelines of databases where people go, we're not recruiting right now, but we certainly be in touch. And so you've then just got to kind of every quarter touch base with them. So it's definitely a long burn, and you do have to definitely send more cold emails than if you're selling something that everyone needs, to get the same kind of traction. So but my suggestion would be keep it super, super simple. Really.
And it's tough because I don't know if you knew this stat, but someone said to me, we have more recruitment companies in the UK than they do in North America. And if you just consider,
really, that's crazy.
And that was also difficult. So you got everyone who kind of maybe gets made redundant. I've got a little bit of a network. Hey, Alice, you're looking for someone. Look, let me reach out. Let me find someone. And you've got a lot of these small independents. So it's a tough gig, but we're learning. It goes back to why you put the fatigues on. If you want to be in business, it's a battle. You have to work hard for the success, and it doesn't just happen. And that's not preaching. That's preaching to the choir. I'm sure everyone who listens to this is like, I get it. You don't need to tell me. But I'm reminding myself a lot of the time, because when you've been through it once, you think, come on, I've done this. It's easy, until you wake up and you go, what?
What was I going
Put on the mask.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whilst crying. What was I going to say there? Would it be a potential opportunity to work with the independents? Is that something that you've considered?
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's interesting, and as one evolves, you've got to find that balance between multiple sales channels and not diluting yourself too much. So
Yeah.
I think for us, instead of trying to compete with the recruitment guys, is actually become a partner, because we're looking at an area no one really wants to focus on, because they feel like traditional recruitment. This is the feedback I've had. Early careers is not something people want to do. The salaries just aren't high enough to justify going to do the search, go and source, verify, put forward on a 20 to 25 grand salary. No one wants to touch it. So we go, okay, here's a partner channel piece. Every recruitment company out there, you don't want to go look. We're doing this. So we're doing the sourcing already. We've got the talent pool. If your customer wants to, just send them the link, and we've got kind of a referral piece through a company called Partner Stack, and so it tracks everything. If they actually went and sold one, they just get their commission, come out, get paid monthly, something very easy. So you're right. Why battle with them? Actually, how do you leverage this as an opportunity? Then you've got your direct team, you've got a digital sales channel, and enterprise. It seems heavy for a business size we are, but you have to have those multi-channels because you're all competing for the same things.
Yeah. I think one of the other selling points that I would see for you is, and this reflects in social media, right? So even from an algorithm perspective, so the way that social media channels are dictating who's going to see your content is basically the level of quality of content, because we're in an era of everybody creating content. So it's just and so you have to be really, really, really good at content, because a lot of it's trash or a lot of it's AI written, and you can't see my poster, but it says authenticity knows no competition, right? So it's all about your authenticity. And I think one of the selling points that I would see as a customer for your service as well is the fact that it's very humanistic. It's a human approach, opposed to what I think is a big trend in the recruitment market, just from my novice eyes, is that AI is becoming a big trend. But actually, I'm personally, as a recruiter, I'm miles away from wanting to be in an AI recruitment model. That doesn't interest me at all, because the thing that's most important to me is the human that I'm dealing with. And as you said earlier, as a business owner, one of the best benefits is you get to choose who to work with, right?
Yeah.
How is AI helping with that? So actually, I think AI is I'm a sales automation person, right? So I absolutely love AI for lots and lots of things, and it can be great for lots of administrative tasks and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to dealing with people, I couldn't disagree with it more. It's like sales. You're never going to replace a human being talking to another human being, right? That will never happen. It doesn't matter how good voice AI is. It's still going to be a human-to-human approach. And I think recruitment is absolutely that. So these AI tools, I think, are interesting, and I'm sure they serve some purpose, but I think actually the human approach is what works best.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that. I think there's that blend, isn't it? It's being efficient with the tools to speed up the process, but the decision needs to be made by humans. So, we were talking about some ethical AI or responsible AI. I've mandated in the business that we're just about to introduce an AI engine just to help almost talent scouting. So can you show me people with this skill set in this region? So it helps bring talent into your view more quickly to shortlist. We have, as a business and as a director for me, AI cannot make any choices. You cannot prompt to say, out of these 5 candidates, which do you think is the best one? Like that doesn't, we cannot do anything. We need to cut that out. Interview all 5 and you'll see which one you like the best. That's what we have to do. And you can have the policies and everything, but it again, some of that culture thing goes back to leadership. What do we believe in as a company? And we have to stick to our beliefs. And if we're going to lose business, then so be it. If we're going to be slightly less efficient than a fully automated AI service that might recommend someone, I'll live with that. And if our business doesn't work because of that, I'll sleep at night. But you're right to identify that we have to get back to a conversation, get back to you would be a great fit. I see something in you that would just fit in this business. I don't know what it is. But I will only know it if I have a conversation with you.
Yeah.
Those feelings sometimes you will never get from some
And
type of automated system.
you said earlier that you go with your gut a lot, and I think that tends to get overlooked. Again, interestingly, Rory Sutherland, this big speaker in the marketing space, he talks about one of the dangers of AI. Not that he's against AI, but one of the dangers of AI from a marketing perspective is if you use AI to create your strategy and do the research and even create your creatives and your ad content, all the rest of it, it goes, you're missing the most important part of creating your marketing function, which is the process of creating it, because the process of creating it is the creativity that comes out. So that's where you get new ideas and new innovation, and you lose all of that by being too heavily reliant on AI. And again, it's that human thing that is still needed and cannot be overlooked. So I think AI will serve such a wonderful place in the world in general, and already is in many respects. But I think it can be overly relied on when actually it's not the correct decision to use it.
Yeah, I think as humans we need to make that decision, and a lot of the stuff will be cyclical. We've all lived through these phases where things come and go, and this trend will be around for a little while, and it's driven around sales. Remember, sales has to take, and I'm using a very broad term, sales leaders, companies need to take some responsibility in these things as well, because we're driven by the number at the end of the quarter. We shareholder value, all those things you mentioned, why the deals get done. It's just the next thing that's along. Cybersecurity was there, cloud computing was there. All these things have their moments in time to go and drive revenue. It's AI's moment, and look, this is probably more effective than the rest of it. But we'll probably all get to a stage like, oh, you know, I'm so. Wouldn't it be cool just to write an email myself? It's like, that was hard work, but imagine I could just do that. It's so liberating. People get this email which says, "Hi Ricky, this is a real human-driven email." But we probably will get to something like that.
Yeah. I think there's a great analogy that I can't remember where this came from, or maybe I even said it. I don't know. That AI could write a great recipe. We can't taste to see if it's any good. Right? That would be beyond level of technology. Ricky, I think we've spoken about so many really, really great topics. I think one of the things that's been so wonderful from my perspective in talking to you and hearing lots about your journey is just hearing so many very common challenges that will be so relevant to anybody who's listening, who's starting a business. You know, it's just everything that you've mentioned are these common challenges. And what's really interesting is how you've been able to figure these things out, you know, without really knowing how to do it, you know, coming up with the right sales methodology, not knowing that the sales methodology even existed as a methodology, you know, all these kind of things, but also the importance of it, you know, the importance of actually, I do need to know how to sell, or I need to sell, because without the sale, there's no business, right?
Yeah, sure.
So I think if anyone was listening to this, and kind of cutting out to the last chapter of this podcast, right? What would be your key takeaways from today's talk?
Look, if we're talking kind of really early stage, this would be probably an unpopular view, but I'll share what I think.
View.
We'll probably hear a lot of, and there's a lot of narrative out there. Look, find the balance, work-life balance. Find, you don't have to just, especially in a business, work 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. I would probably say that's not true. Like, my belief is like there's effort, there's discipline, and then there's sacrifice. Like, effort is you just have to do something. Like, the discipline is you got to keep doing it every day, and the sacrifice is what are you prepared to do up to achieve the thing you're working towards. So for me, my journey was in those early days, it was 7 days a week, 16 hours a day. And I used to really have a calculation in my head. I'd get to 5 o'clock and like in a normal day, when in the real early days, so that would be the end of my working day, and then I'd start the business, like the business work. But even when I was in the business full time, I used to get to 5 o'clock and I'd go, okay, I would say probably 50% of my competitors are going home right now because they, they've chosen to have a different balance. So I go, okay, so if I put in 2 hours more, and I do this every day for 5 days, even if I did it it's 10 hours a week, that's 40 hours a month. I'm 1 week ahead of everyone else through this. And I didn't use it as a macho thing. I'm working 40 hours, but I just used to have this very basic calculation. For every hour more I put in, I felt like I was getting one step closer to being slightly better than some of our competitors just through effort. So it's a long-winded way. Like these things don't come without that. Like I go back to, you got to do it. You got to keep on doing it. And to do those two things, it comes with sacrifice. And you're blessed if you have a strong network around you. I reference my wife a lot. Without her support, looking after our kids, none of our business things would have ever taken off, because my sacrifice was I was out on the road going to do things, and I left her to look after the family things, and she accepted that responsibility, for which I'm hugely grateful for. So like that, but that was the sacrifice we chose to make as a family. But that might not be for everyone. It might be a single person. What are you prepared to give up? And going to see friends, going to the pub, whatever it may be. Unfortunately, I think that underpins, if you had to poll majority of, and I'm talking success in our case was like here, not here, but those that get to that mid stage who built a decent business, I think they probably are all underpinned through efforts and sacrifice and that discipline of doing it every day, which gets them to a point where it's sustainable. And I think this is the pivot point when for me, I used to stand on the side of the pitch, watch my sons play football. And in the beginning, I felt guilty. I'd be like, I could be answering emails. I could be doing some work that gets me ready for Monday, which gets me further ahead. My success criteria was one Saturday. I was actually, my job is to create opportunity for the rest of the business. I don't need to do the work. I don't need to feel guilty. I can just enjoy it. That was my version of success. It never was driven by monetary, what have we got to in million, 5 million in revenue. I wasn't driven by that. It was more these intrinsic things of, I can watch my kids play football without any guilt because we built a sustainable business, but I couldn't get to that point without those long days and things. I don't know if that helps or not, but that's what certainly was my experience.
It's interesting. Someone brought up to me the other day around the 4-hour week. It's this book someone's written, and around, how everyone could have a 4-hour week. And my answer or my reflection on that was, well, you can get there, but to get there, you need to have your 16-hour days, right? Because I'll just do an hour today. No, that's not going to happen, right? I think that was a really, really nice thing to reflect on, and a solid piece of advice, because actually it does require that as an entrepreneur, in my experience. And for me, it's always felt less of a sacrifice because I feel so passionate about it. So it doesn't feel like I'm sacrificing unless I am literally sacrificing something. But in general, my time has felt less of a sacrifice unless it's impacting someone else, like you say, like your kids or something on those lines, which, depending on your life circumstance, that is something that you might have to go through. And the reflections that I would like to feedback on are all sales-based, because I think that there were some really, really core messages there around, well, if you're a B2B organization, the go-to-market strategy that you started off with was cold email marketing. That seemed to be the one that worked. And then from a sales methodology perspective, you knew what you were doing. Funnily enough, you set an appointment, you create a presentation, you close business. And then the other one that I'd like to point out is pressure selling doesn't work. Pressure selling does not work. You can't do fear-based selling. And funnily enough, you can't do that in email marketing. You can't do that. Cybersecurity, I always found one of the hardest campaigns to do, because you can't do fear-based selling, but actually people buy because of fear. You just can't tell them it's because of something that's fearful. So it's a really hard messaging to get right, because it's a fear-based. So, pressure selling doesn't work, but you can have methodologies which help create a sense of urgency in the sales process. So we've got a limited time discount if you want it, but you have to set that up from the beginning. So I think that's a really good take home, because again, I think there's this misconception in the sales, people who are unexperienced in sales and maybe starting new businesses, they think that they have to sell and be this kind of savvy salesperson who's pressure selling people all the time. That's not the case. It's the art of listening. Art of listening and just making friends with people is all you really have to do. And when you're really enthusiastic about a product that is authentically right for them, people will naturally purchase from you. And I think that's a really interesting point and a really important thing for somebody who has no sales experience, who's listening to this podcast going, I have no fucking idea. I've got a great product, or I've got a great service, or I'm really passionate about this thing, but I have no idea how to sell it. Just be really authentic. Be really, really authentic. But if you can learn a methodology, it's going to speed up the process.
Absolutely. That's something we thought about that time. It took me 16 years to get there.
And interestingly, what you're implementing in your business now is having different sales channels. Enterprise sales, you already have set up partners. I know Partner Stack, the affiliate software for that. You've got your affiliates, so you've got your partner, even though that's not your focus, you've got that channel ready to go. So if anyone is interested, they can sign up straight away. You're going directly to businesses. So you've got a multitude. So here's somebody, it's really nice to listen to this because you've got someone who's gone from no sales experience going, I'll send some emails, to now going, right, I'm going to have these different channels. I've got this set up. I know I need to focus here. So, now you're really grounded, solid, understand what you're doing, even though you recognize that actually learning how to sell the thing that you're selling takes time, right? And that's a natural part of the process. So I think if you're new in business, it is going to be normal. You have to figure out how that sales process is going to work. But you can certainly speed up the process by trying different channels and seeing which one is resonating the quickest.
I was going to say, I've just got my Chat GPT window here feeding me all the information. I actually haven't started a business in the past. It was just a Chat GPT.
Yeah, it was all an AI prompt. And in fact, the image that we're looking at right now is
Maybe Grok.
Yeah. All right, Ricky. Well, thank you so much for joining me on today's talk. It was absolutely fascinating, and I think there was loads and loads and loads of great takeaways for anyone listening. And I think there'll be an enormous resonance for anyone who's starting a new business and trying to figure this stuff out like you've had to do. So thank you for sharing your experience and being so open with it all.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
You're most welcome. Good to see you.
You too. Bye-bye.